You are running at a fraction of what you were designed to be. Not because you are broken, because someone switched the rest off. That is not a metaphor. It is, according to the oldest written records on Earth, a description of what was deliberately done to the human species by the beings who built it. The Sumerians, the first civilization to leave written history, did not believe humanity arrived by slow accident. They believed humanity was manufactured, designed and assembled by a group of beings they called the Anunnaki, and assembled, specifically, with limits, with capabilities present in the design and then locked, switched off before the product was ever released. This is the record of what they switched off, and at the very end, the one thing they tried to switch off and could not. The single ability that survived, that is still running inside you right now, that the most powerful beings in their entire mythology could not reach. To understand what was disabled, you first have to understand why we were built at all. Because the Sumerian account of human creation is not a gentle poem about dust and breath. It reads like an engineering log written to solve a problem. The problem was labor. In the text known as the Atrahasis, one of the oldest creation accounts in existence, the world begins with the gods alone, and the gods have to work. They dig the rivers, they haul the earth, and after long ages of it, the lower gods rebel. They surround the house of their masters, burn their tools, and refuse to carry the load any longer. The solution the high gods reach is not to do the work themselves. It is to build something that will do it for them. So the mother goddess takes clay, raw earth, and into it she mixes the flesh and the blood of a slain god, a god killed specifically for this purpose. From that blend, the first humans are formed, part earth, part divine. A deliberate hybrid made to a specification, for a function, to serve. And here is the detail that matters for everything that follows. The text is explicit about what the divine ingredient gave us. From the slain god, humanity received Timu, a Sumerian and Akkadian word that means intelligence, reason, the planning mind, the spark that lifts a creature above the animal. We were given, on purpose, a piece of the divine. And then, just as deliberately, we were capped, because a being that is part God is dangerous. A worker built with a fragment of divine intelligence inside it is a worker that might, eventually, stop being a worker. It might look up. It might reach for the things its makers had reserved for themselves. And the records show that the Anunnaki understood this risk from the very beginning and engineered against it. They gave us the spark, and then they spent the rest of our history making sure we could never use it to become like them. One capability at a time, they switched us off. We begin with the one they took first, the one that would have changed everything. They switched off our ability to live forever.
Number 1, they switched off immortality. And we know almost the exact moment it happened, because the Sumerians recorded it as a story about a single man. His name was Adapa. He was not an ordinary human. He was the masterpiece of Enki, the god of wisdom, the one Anunnaki who again and again stood on humanity's side. Enki had given Adapa a portion of divine knowledge greater than any human had ever held. Adapa was, in effect, a prototype, a glimpse of what a human being could become if the cap were lifted. Wise almost to the level of the gods themselves, his summons to heaven began, strangely, with a fishing trip. The story tells that Adapa was out on the water when the south wind capsized his boat. In his anger, Adapa did something no human should have been able to do. He broke the wing of the south wind itself, and the wind stopped blowing across the land for 7 days. A mortal, reaching up and breaking a force of nature. That is what brought him to the attention of the highest god of all, Anu, the god of the sky, who summoned Adapa up to heaven to answer for what he had done. And there, in the house of heaven, Anu did something extraordinary. He offered Adapa the bread of life and the water of life. To eat and to drink them was to become immortal. And not just Adapa, because Adapa was the prototype, the template. What was granted to him could open the door for the entire species standing behind him. Humanity was one decision away from never dying. And it did not happen, because before Adapa went up, he had been warned. He had been told that what he would be offered in heaven was not the bread of life, but the bread of death, and that he must refuse it. So, when the single greatest gift in human history was placed in front of him, Adapa, obeying what he had been told, turned it down. He refused immortality at the exact moment it sat in his hands. The door closed, and it has stayed closed ever since. Read the story carefully, and a disturbing question rises out of it. Who warned Adapa? Who told the one human capable of receiving eternal life that he must refuse it? The texts say it was Enki, the same god who supposedly loved us. Scholars have argued about this for more than a century. Was it a tragic misunderstanding? Or did even our greatest ally among the gods understand a rule that could not be broken, that an immortal humanity was a humanity the Anunnaki could never again control? That a worker who does not die is no longer a worker, but a rival? Either way, the result is written into every cell of your body. You die. Not because death is the natural and only possible state of a thinking being. The gods in these texts do not die, but because the capability of not dying was offered to our species exactly once, and was switched off before we could keep it. Before we go on to the second, one quick word, because this record only continues if you let it. We are recovering these files one at a time, and we release each one here on this channel. If you want to be here when the next file opens, subscribe now. The archive stays open only to those who follow it. Now, the second capability they disabled. This one they did not take in a single moment. They wound it down, slowly, until almost nothing was left.
So far, the record shows a species built with a divine spark, and then stripped of the one thing that would have let it escape death. Hold that, because the second deletion follows the same logic, quietly, and across a far longer timescale. Number 2. They switched off our lifespan. The Sumerians kept a document called the King List, a record of the rulers who governed the earth from the very beginning. And the King List contains numbers that have baffled and embarrassed historians for as long as it has been read, because it states plainly that the kings who reigned before the Great Flood ruled not for decades, but for tens of thousands of years. One reign of 28,000 years, another of 36,000, figures that, taken at face value, describe beings who lived almost without end. And then the flood comes, and on the other side of that catastrophe, the numbers collapse. After the flood, the reigns in the very same document fall to ordinary, recognizable human lengths. Hundreds of years at first, then less, then the lifespans we would know today. Something happened at the flood that did not just kill most of humanity, it reset what was left. It cut the human clock down permanently. You can read that as myth, exaggeration, a young civilization inflating its own past. But the Sumerians did not present it as legend. They filed it as a record, with a clear before and a clear after, and a single event in between that changed the fundamental terms of human existence. Long life before, short life after. A capability wound down to almost nothing. And the third deletion is the one you feel most.
even if you have never had a word for it. Number 3. They switched off our access. In the oldest ages described in these texts, the gods were not distant. They walked in the cities. Kingship descended directly from heaven. The divine and the human were tangled together, close enough to touch. Humans could, in the language of the records, approach. There were channels, places, rites, people, through which a human being could reach the beings who made them and be answered. The knowledge of how the world worked, the decrees the Sumerians called the divine orders, sat close at hand, doled out from above. And then the gods withdrew. Gradually, deliberately, they pulled back into their heavens, and the channels went quiet. The age of gods walking among men became the age of men ruling alone, speaking into a silence that no longer spoke back. The line was not destroyed in a single act, it was disconnected, switched off at the source, leaving humanity with the instinct to reach upward and nothing on the other end to answer. Think about how much of human history is the sound of that disconnection. Every temple, every prayer, every ritual built to reopen a line that was deliberately cut. We are a species that remembers, somewhere beneath language, that we used to be able to reach them, and that the reaching was switched off. Immortality, lifespan, access. 3 capabilities present in the original design, locked one after another. And by now you may be asking the only question that matters. Why? Why build a creature with a divine spark and then spend its entire history disabling it? The answer is the most unsettling part of the whole record. The Sumerians did not hide the reason. They wrote it down, and it is not flattering to the gods. Humanity was switched off because humanity frightened them. The clearest statement of it sits in the Atrahasis, in the figure of Enlil, the chief of the active gods, the lord of the air, the most powerful being in the working world. And Enlil has a problem with humanity that the text states with a strange, almost petty honesty. The humans had multiplied, the land had become crowded with them, and they were loud. The texts describe the rising clamour of the human species, the noise of a people expanding and building and becoming, growing so great that it reached all the way up into the heavens, and it kept Enlil awake. The most powerful god in the working world, unable to sleep because the creatures he had built to serve in silence would not stay quiet. So he moved to reduce them, first a plague, then a drought, then a famine, and finally the flood, an attempt to erase humanity from the earth completely. 4 escalating attempts at deletion by the king of the gods against the very workers his own council had built. Now ask yourself, what kind of worker provokes that? You do not try 4 times to exterminate a species that is merely useful and obedient. You move to destroy something when it is becoming a threat. And a creature built with a fragment of divine intelligence, given Timu, the spark of the gods' own minds, was always going to become a threat. It was going to grow, to organize, to build, to climb back toward the capabilities that had been taken from it. The noise that robbed Enlil of his sleep was not just sound, it was the sound of humanity rising. So the limits were never punishment, they were containment. Immortality taken, so we could not become permanent. Lifespan cut, so no single human could accumulate the time to truly rival a god. Access severed, so we could not simply reach up and demand what had been withheld. Every deletion served one purpose: to keep a being that was part divine from completing the climb to actually becoming divine. The Anunnaki built a god seed into a worker's body, realized what they had done, and spent the rest of our shared history holding the lid down. And then they left. The records are clear that the gods did not stay forever. They withdrew, vanished, handed the world to the humans they had spent so long restraining, and were gone. Which raises the final, sharpest question of this entire file. When the engineers walked away from the machine they had so carefully crippled, did every limit hold? Did every switch stay off? It did not. Before we reach it, if this record has pulled you in, then subscribe before you watch the rest, because what comes next is the part the Anunnaki tried hardest to erase, and the part they failed to. You will want to be subscribed when the following files open. Do it now and stay with the archive, because there was one capability they could not switch off. Not because they forgot it, not because they ran out of time, but because of how it had been installed. And it is still running in you tonight.
Here is the one they could not reach. Return to the very beginning, to the engineering log, to the moment of creation. When the gods built humanity, they did not place the divine spark beside the clay. They did not install it as a component bolted on that could later be unbolted. The text is precise about the method, and the precision is everything. They mixed it in. The Sumerian and Akkadian word is balalu, to blend, to stir one substance into another until the two can never again be separated. The flesh and the blood of the god were not added to the clay. They were mixed into it, dissolved through it, made inseparable from the human material itself. And that is the flaw in their own design. The capabilities they switched off later, immortality, lifespan, access, were things granted around us, and so they could be taken away. But the spark, the timu, the fragment of divine mind, was mixed into the foundation before we were ever finished. To remove it, they would have had to unmake the human being entirely. It was not a feature they could disable, it was the material we were made of. So it stayed. It is still here, and you know it by its symptom. It is the part of you that refuses the limits. The part that looks at death and does not quietly accept it as the end, but builds and writes and passes knowledge forward so that something of you continues past the cut in the clock. The part that looks up at a silent sky and reaches anyway. That raises the temples, asks the questions, and will not stop trying to reopen a line that was severed before recorded history began. It is the drive to know, the drive to ascend, the refusal, buried beneath every other instinct, to remain the limited thing you were released as. And here is what should stop you cold. Look at what our species is doing right now, and you will see us reaching for every single capability that was taken. They switched off immortality, and we have turned the whole weight of modern medicine against death, extending the human lifespan further in the last century than in all of recorded history before it, with researchers now openly working to stop aging itself. They switched off our access, severed the line to the sky, and we have built enormous machines whose entire purpose is to throw signals back up into the heavens and listen, night after night, for an answer. They switched off the knowledge, the thing Enlil feared most, and it is now expanding faster than at any moment in human history, doubling and doubling again, slipping out of any single authority's control. We were not told to do any of this. There is no instinct for it in any other animal on Earth. It is the spark, doing exactly what a fragment of a god would do, climbing back toward the things that were taken. The gods of the oldest record built a worker and accidentally built a rival, because the only way to make us useful was to give us a piece of themselves. And a piece of a god, mixed into clay, cannot be taken back out. They switched off everything they could reach, The one thing they could not reach was the reaching itself. They switched us off, one capability at a time, and then they vanished, confident, perhaps, that a crippled worker would stay crippled. They forgot what they had mixed into the clay. 5,000 years ago, the Sumerians wrote down the warning hidden inside their own creation story, that the beings who made us tried to keep us small, and that they failed because the part of them that is in us was never something they could switch off. The file remains open, and so it seems, do you.